putting the zoom.
Okay,
Cool.
we'll get into it then. So go with it whatever year you want.
In the year zero, there was nothing.
Except broken down industrial cities.
Well, no, he made that later.
Oh, you're going to like way back year zero,
But
like
the film starts zero.
Okay. Oh
Yeah.
well, yes, it does. It goes straight for Genesis. The film being Noah. So this is Matt.
This is Luke.
Welcome to the Sci-Fi Sanctuary. Now, Noah, it's like that's not sci-fi, but this film is just weirdly played that way.
Well, it is really a sister piece to The Fountain, I think.
Yeah.
This one deals in Christian mythology the same way that one did Buddhist mythology.
Yeah, but one of the reasons I went for it is when we were talking just before hitting the mic that it's one of the few films in recent history that really just goes straight for a biblical story. I mean, they completely, take a different take on it, but
how close did this come out to Evan Almighty?
Pretty much later, like
okay.
10 years later.
Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, they're very different Noah's Ark films.
Yes.
Like, a lot of the films we talked about do touch on biblical themes. Like, every superhero movie loves to have the shot where they make him look like Christ.
Right.
But this is I haven't seen a film in 30 years that is just, here is a story from since The Passion.
Yeah, I'm thinking the
Passion of the Christ is the last big budget biblical film I can remember.
And if you go Old Testament, you go back to the 50s with the Cecil B. DeMille stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe a few in the 60s. I know Jeffrey Hunter played Jesus once. Well, that's New Testament.
Yeah, so that's New Testament, yeah.
Anyway, the main thing here is we're getting the most modern iteration of the flood story, which maybe they should have done Gilgamesh, to be honest. But whatever, we got Noah today. And we really want to get down into that flood story. So I brought in a guest today. I've been hearing him on podcasts. Geez, he's shown up on half of the podcasts I listened to over the past 5 years. I guess I should name check a few. I think I've heard him on Earth Agents and Tinfoil Hat and Lost Origins and a few others. But he takes ancient myths and stories and tries to make them a little more logical by basically mapping them against the stars. So hello, David Mathisen.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it because I know in the past when I've heard you, you've blown my mind. So let's see where it goes today.
Well, thanks. I'm looking forward to talking with you guys. It's definitely a podcast I haven't been on before. And movies, drama is actually really important in ancient times. The actors were usually acting the parts of the gods and goddesses. And if you go to China and see Cantonese opera, they put on special paint, and there's certain characters. I don't know about the acting in Japan, but I would suspect that there's similarities.
Like a mask rather than face paint.
They
switch masks for different moods.
Kabuki, no.
Right. Ancient Greece did that. And then there's Beijing opera, which has some different face paint. But when they put on the paint of that character, they take on the role of that god or goddess, and they can't speak out of character when they're inside the certain sacred space. I know it's that way in Taiwan. And actually, they're not even acting for the people in the audience. You can eat food and talk to your neighbor because they're actually doing the act for the spirit realm and for the gods. So it's interesting that you have a podcast all about the modern, iteration of drama, and it's all related to the realm of the gods as well.
Yeah, sometimes it's a monster movie. Then we're just going to talk about how cool that monster is. But, there's the thing about sci-fi is it's usually a metaphor. So you can apply that to so many things in, modern politics, again, ancient things. It's just a good way to get down into things. And maybe it's a little bit of a feint, right? Like, hey, we're talking sci-fi, but now we're going to actually get a little deeper, which dear listener, we are doing that today. So,
I mean, you say we don't do that on monster movies. We went pretty deep on our last one. So,
okay, we do, but we also talk about how cool the monsters are. So,
yeah, well, there might be a little bit of that in this one too.
Yeah, there are some monsters. I thought the Transformer vibe would hit you.
Yeah, big time. Recently, I've been super into reading about, for a long time, Japanese mythology, and then recently a lot of Greek mythology. And people very often talk about oh, this was probably a metaphor for this actual historical event or prehistorical event. But it's so rare that at least growing up in a Christian country, we bother to do that with the Christian Bible. Where like, I read like Greek myths and like, oh, well, we think Zeus was developed from these different warrior kings and it's an amalgamation of these legends. And the Japanese myths, oh, they talk about this, but actually we think it was a land migration from Korea and it's been warped into this. But when we're growing up in the UK, it's like, no, the Bible just happened.
That's where we get to the whole spaghetti monster, right?
Yeah.
The flying spaghetti monster. But
of course, the Bible is also open to a lot of this kind of interpretation. Even like a lot of the demons in the Old Testament are specifically rival gods.
Right.
From when Judaism was just one tribe among many. And you read the Old Testament and weirdly, it doesn't, these days when people talk about God, it's this very philosophical, well, life exists, so there must have been a creator. But you read the actual Bible and he's like this petty bitch. And when you hear the very Old Testament stories, there are other rival gods of rival tribes and he like slays them. And he's not that different from a Greek god
and there's plenty of books they just left out of the Bible.
Yeah, well, because they've redeveloped it into this very different idea of what a god is.
Right. But as for this movie, I guess I'm pretty much the point man. I sicked it on both of you. I did see this in the theater. I'm a fan of Darren Aronofsky, the director. This one, I guess I see it as an honorable failure. Like I saw it, and I remember coming out of the theater like not feeling particularly good because it doesn't make you feel very good. But then I just like it stayed in my subconscious, and I think more and more about it. And about 3 years later, I'm like, man, I need to revisit that movie. And I watched it again and again. Yeah, I was like, wow, this is kind of a heavy slog. And it just happened again now. But it is a fantastic springboard, just like a very interesting outlier. So having thrown this weird one upon both of you, how about your first impressions?
Well, just first impressions visually, you can tell this was made at the peak of Transformers. Those shots of the monsters in like the sunsets and stuff, they look exactly like shots of the early Transformers in Revenge of the Fallen or something.
Right.
Like those films are considered very dumb and stupid, but they had a huge influence on how effects and visuals are done.
The voices as well.
Yeah.
Auto body.
Yeah. Overall, at first I felt like, okay, this is an interesting take on a Bible story, but it's just giving me this Bible story. It's not giving me much of a twist.
Right.
By the end, I wondered if it was trying to say something about whether I'm doing what God says because God says to do it, whether that is actually moral. Seemed to be the question the film was trying to ask.
Okay.
Which is something that I've often thought is like, it's odd that your idea of good is doing what I'm told. So I think there was some questions there, but you could definitely read this as just, oh, they're just retelling this Bible story.
Yeah. David, what were your impressions on this one? I got a bit in here.
Yeah,
that was funny. But
well, as long as everyone knows that Matt picked it, then I didn't pick it. No, I enjoy hearing your interpretations. You guys are obviously very. I enjoy your podcast now that I've been introduced to you and listened to it. So I think the things that Luke just said are good, and I don't think they had that. Back then, I think there wasn't as much CGI as they show in that movie. I felt like there was a lot of lost opportunity. They were obviously playing with some themes, some big themes, but I don't want to criticize somebody else's art, so I don't. But I felt like the character development was not really, just yelling louder doesn't, like you see. I just watched, and it's not a fair comparison, but just a couple nights before, I just watched Casablanca, one of the greatest movies of all time. But look at Rick. Rick kind of has to wrestle with, does he want to just be his own individual? I stick my neck out for no one. And then he changes by the end of the movie, but he's been hurt by this woman. And, she comes to him and says, you're just not the same man. I could have told the Rick that I knew in Paris, but I can't tell the one who looked at me with so much hatred last night. But then at the end, he changes and lives for others. But there's like character development. There's like, you care about Ilsa, and you see their motivations. I thought in this movie, they were playing with those ideas that, that Luke just expressed as he but there was, they're just the dialogue, the writing. It's like how uh, Conan the Barbarian had better character
The
development
film didn't really have
and lines,
characters.
Yeah, I mean, but we've got Russell Crowe, we've got Jennifer Connelly, we've got these great actors. We've got who plays his grandfather, Anthony Hopkins. How is there more character development in Conan the Barbarian than in that movie? But definitely they're not taking it strictly literally. You see that because in the Bible, he's told to build the ark so that we're going to preserve the human race. I mean, why are you building this ark? Well, so I can kill us all off, starting with the babies. I mean, it makes no sense at all. Just so we can live a little longer than all the people who perished in the flood, and then we'll die too. That the whole tension was based around that question. Well, no, we're not going to survive, or if we do, it'll just be because of God's will. But he told you to build the ark. He told you the dimensions, or in some cases, the angel Uriel came and told them. It's different in different ancient texts. But so I thought there was an attempt to play out all those things, but I didn't feel like the character development in the writing supported any sort of real interest in me and the character. So I don't want to bash it. I think it's a great jumping off point for a lot of issues, but the stories are not literal, and the directors know that, and they say that in some interviews. I looked up some interviews, and they said, look, don't get on us because we're not taking it exactly literally. These stories are actually all about us. There's a quotation that I love. I didn't put it in my presentation of slides, but by Alvin Boyd Kuhn, who says, the stories of the Bible are not about ancient kings and queens and heroes and princesses. They're about each and every man and woman. And until you see yourself as the figure in the story, you haven't interpreted it right. So these stories are about us. And so, that they're trying to get at these issues that have to do with things that we wrestle with. I just didn't feel like it made it for me.
Actually, I thought your Casablanca sort of comparison was interesting because Noah was made with like the greatest of ambitions. Darren Aronofsky unfortunately doesn't have a shred of humor, but when he pulls off his pretensions, he pulls it off. Here, not quite. Casablanca, everyone involved in the making of that film thought we're just making like a standard pot boiler, but everyone just happened to do their best job without trying, kind of a Zen thing, and it ended up being like a fantastic movie. That was supposed to be, we'll make it at least the front end of your double feature. It was that much, but it was not at any point until people loved it. It wasn't really considered to be anything with great ambitions or anything like that. So.
And you mentioned humor. I mean, and they're dealing with deep subjects, obviously, in that movie. I mean, there's big Casablanca going on, but there's humor all the way through. I mean, the lines are, I haven't probably watched it in 20 years, and I was literally tears coming out of my eyes at some of the lines that were so funny, so witty, and yet they're dealing with big things. And Noah, to me, this iteration of Noah was so humorless that it was like, come on, Anyway, I don't want to bash it. I already have too much. I'll let you guys talk about it.
No, it's cool. If you want to hear some bashing, go back to our Ready Player One podcast.
Well, you're allowed to bash that because it's not art.
But let's get just for a few minutes. We're going to get into the details of the movie, and then really just get into the flood story. But Brother Luke, will you preach to the choir?
I will.
Noah.
I've done something a little bit different this week.
Okay, that's cool.
In the beginning.
In
the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all of the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord I have brought forth a man." Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord then said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation." Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came on the earth. On that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground, and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days.
It's like someone pre-wrote it for you, Brother Luke.
Like a whole bunch of people pre-wrote it for me.
Yeah,
Over
several
centuries.
times. Several times, that's right. No, sorry.
King James wrote it for me.
There we go. You reading that made me think of when I was a kid, actually with one of our other guests, Andrew. We were trying to, we had one of my friends visiting, and we were trying to make our TV show on like a VHS camcorder, and we were dancing, doing stupid stuff. I don't remember, but the joke was my friend would just keep coming in with a large leather-bound Bible and reading random passages out of it. So that was kind of fun. As for this movie, David, you already mentioned, yeah, it's they have such a fantastic cast, and they might have wasted a little bit, but I mean, just yeah, if I were casting a movie, this would be pretty much what I'd want, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, they it's one of those films that there's never any scene that isn't the highest tension, most dramatic, shouting your face off scene. Because it doesn't go up and down and have I don't care about any of it.
Right.
Because it's like they're constantly at the highest level of energy. So what scenes am I supposed to be taking in, or is it all supposed to be the most dramatic, important thing I've ever seen?
Well, I told you in my notes, I didn't see why they weren't throwing Noah off the boat at any moment in the second half. So
yeah, is he so much stronger than the rest of them that it's just like, well, if he wants to kill our baby, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Right, that's his heroic turn. He doesn't murder newborn babies. I mean, that's not so hard to do, I think.
I mean, he does go and drink himself into a stupor when he realized how close he got.
Yeah, true. But partying on the beach there in his man cave.
Butt on the beach.
Hey, that must have been a good party. But we'll of course talk more about that in a more interesting sense later. But I forgot Emma Watson was in here, so that's always I like her. She's fun.
She still looks so young in this.
Yeah, she's not that. I think she's your age.
Yeah, she the Harry Potter cast are almost the same age as me.
Okay.
But yeah, she's like getting pregnant in this film, but to me she still looks like she's 15.
Yeah, true. Jennifer Connelly, of course, this is the last time I remember seeing her. I like her. Did she?
Yeah, I think she was in like Troy maybe and Hulk, but nothing more recently.
That was before this.
Yeah, that was a long time before this.
She's a good actor, so yeah, I feel like we should see a little more of her. Hopkins is in for 1 minute.
He's got 2 or 3 scenes, so he's in it a bit.
He's the most fun.
Yeah, I feel like he was fun and humorful and characterful despite Aronofsky, not because of.
Yeah,
he's well, I'm just going to turn up and do my Anthony Hopkins thing, and you can't stop me. Seems like his vibe.
And Ray Winston as our villain.
That's what I was about to try and look up.
Ray Winston, yes.
I love Ray Winston and everything.
Yeah, he's great here. I was rooting for him over Noah.
I mean, you didn't grow up in the UK, so you're not used to just having him constantly on the TV and like adverts for stuff. Like shouting at you to bet on the football and things. So when I see him in like these big dramatic roles, like he played Beowulf, here he is in like the Bible. But to me, he's the guy who like shouts at me that I should bet on a football match, and at the end tells me to gamble responsibly.
But I think we covered. I think we just shouted out.
Well, the other thing with the cast, they're all like they got this gritty look, and they look like they've been through hell, and they're like. Apart from one of his sons who looks like he stepped out of Zoolander. He's constantly like this super clean white face, the perfect hair, big red lips. He doesn't look like anyone else in this movie. He doesn't look like he's living through the apocalypse. He just looks like he's literally a male model who's been hired to pout.
Dave, we are trying to power through this bit just so we can get
Oh,
to
no,
the
no,
presentation
go,
stuff. But do you
go,
have any actor notes?
well, those are some interesting observations actually about the sons. If you read the biblical text, Noah was 500 years old when he bore Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and then he was 600 when he went into the ark. So how old would Shem, Ham, and Japheth be?
Some simple math, yeah.
100.
Looking good for
So,
100.
yeah.
Just
They still weren't tough enough to take on their dad at that point.
right.
They were just respecting his wishes. But the text obviously says that the 3 sons of Noah and the 3 wives of the 3 sons were on the boat, and Noah and his wife. So that's a total of 8 people on the boat, which you find in myths around the world, actually 8 people on the boat. So, I guess
the film seemed to imply that the 2 sons were going to have to like wait for those babies to grow up.
I know that's what I was about to say, but I was like hesitating to even go there, but that's exactly what it implies.
Son.
And it's like, what is up with that?
It's
So
either
it's
that
like
or
it's
Ray
just
Winston
it's
with his
horrid
wife.
all around. It's awful all around. Yeah,
Especially in terms of
I didn't
genetics.
like that.
But any which way, like if the story is that only like 4 to 8 people survive, there's gonna be a lot of inbreeding. That's just inevitable. Yeah, that's sort of one that everyone glosses over with the whole Noah thing.
I guess the other thing that does endear this movie to me a bit is it is the movie where Russell Crowe literally sails around a boat around the world like fighting people. So
yeah, I mean it's one of the movies where Russell Crowe sails around the world fighting people.
Yeah, this is the clearest one. Well, Master and Commander.
Master and Commander.
I
Yeah.
don't think he fights people so much in that one. He's definitely fighting on this one.
Yeah.
He's in fighting mood here.
Yeah, he fights the French. Come on.
Yeah, with a large gun, so not with his fists.
He's got these large guns.
That's true.
Oh, he's got those guns. Yeah, that's Gladiator.
Yeah.
Let's do a little bit on the characters. It's basically they're yelling at each other, and Noah, you want to throw off the boat. I mean,
they're not really supposed to be characters, right? They're just these biblical figures. They're archetypes. And you can tell Aronofsky's the kind of director who he hires an actor and just says like, do your thing. Russell Crowe, come and do your Russell Crowe thing. Anthony Hopkins, do your Anthony Hopkins things. Pretty boy, just pout. Jennifer Connelly look concerned.
I guess we'll go into design then, where the 2 things that I really love here are, one, we don't get enough to see of the burnt out industrial civilization. We get a few glimpses, some like advanced Mad Max sort of glimpses. And I like those.
Well, see, it's advanced, but it's only like early industrial revolution advanced.
It's pretty impressive for pre-Diluvian.
But I mean, the Bible implies that there's been like centuries of civilization and then it's all destroyed. Yeah. So I think it's a nice touch.
Yeah, because I feel like especially those 50s, 60s Bible epics would not have thrown that in. And the other thing I really like about the design are the just psychedelic like clippy shots. I love those.
Oh, like when time passes and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I like avant-garde films, so that presses my buttons. But
I had a lot of time for the Watchers, are they called?
Yeah, I was about to say I need to give you your monster corner for a minute.
Well, it's the closest I've seen a film get to actually depicting angels as they appear in the Bible.
Yeah.
Like, is the Bible angels just like these wills within wills of burning, flaming majesty that you can't comprehend, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get an alternate view of that before this podcast is over. But
okay. So I mean, it wasn't quite that, but they were like these burning beings of light, and then they were cast into a rock and looked kind of monstrous and scary. Plus so I had a lot of time for that, and they were very Transformers. They were their own thing.
Yeah,
but it's just the way they moved, the kind of lighting they had, that humanoid but with a bit of weirdness tacked on. I mean, I don't know who did these effects, but I bet there was some overlap in staff.
That wouldn't surprise me.
But that was just, and also the kind of lighting, those blue lights, orange lights.
Well, we said before, blue and orange seems to be the colors for this time period. In a movie.
I think this would have been like right at the tail end of that, because a couple of years later you're getting Thor Ragnarok and stuff, and people are going back to color.
Yeah,
and then they don't make films for 2 years because the world ends. But
and the arc itself was very cool.
Yeah, but very big and square. That Russell Crowe Robin Hood that came out.
This has
they inexplicably had those World War II landing vehicles that didn't exist.
Or,
You look, it reminds me of the boats from that.
or that weird movie we did, High Life, from last year with the with like
the spaceship that's just a
file
cube.
cabinet thing. But I just thought it was cool because it wasn't like that. Just like I think it was someone in the Netherlands or something built their own ark, which
Right.
is very much more like the children's storybook version.
Yeah, which is just a generic boat.
Yeah, but I like this. Just like,
well, this makes sense. It's just a
cube
big
on
thing
it.
full of animals to float.
Right. David, you want to throw out any design notes?
Well, yeah, actually, the director actually said that on that last point in one of the interviews that I read of him online. It was a written transcript of an interview. He said, they do give you the dimensions of the arc in the text, and so I tried to go with that. And so it is, rectangular and boxy, following what's in the text. So not like he says you always see it depicted as a boat. Now we'll talk about why I think that might be based on the stars a little bit later, but that was it's interesting that you latched onto that difference, and the director actually was talking about that in this interview that I saw. But the other, I would say the Watchers were definitely memorable. I don't dwell on them too much in my presentation here, but that comes out of the book of Enoch, or what are called Enochian writings, which have had tremendous influence over Western esotericism. They have not been included in the Bible, in the canonical Bible, under most literalist denominations, except the Ethiopian church does keep the Enochian. There's 3 groups of Enochian texts. They've been grouped into, modern scholars call them Enoch 1, 2, and 3. And they have a lot of those lists of angels and fallen angels and, demons. And they're very, rich with important textual stuff. And so I thought the Watchers were pretty memorable. I wouldn't say they're, they're not necessarily literal depictions. It's kind of an imaginative depiction. But I thought they reminded me of Ents, the Battle of the Ents in the second Lord of the Rings at Isengard, smashing the orcs. In fact, I thought it was so reminiscent of that. I was like, am I watching Lord of the Rings here? But again, with less humor and character development.
They
Not
had
to
that
bash
same
on it
thing
again.
of very slowly coming around to helping out as well.
Yeah, I did. I although it wasn't really explained as to why we will help this man. He just kind of decided. But
Well, because some water came out of the ground.
but they were memorable. They kind of had 6 arms going at all at once, which was
I thought
cool
it
to watch.
was it supposed to be that 2 of the arms were the wings? I wasn't quite sure, but it was a weird look. I liked it.
But I guess we should segue that to, of course, you have a presentation for us, which is awesome. So, and listeners, this is usually an audio only podcast. We do post the raw video to YouTube, so you'll be able to see some of this stuff. Or, Dave, I told you last time I listened to you on a podcast, I happened to be in a midnight rice field, and all I had to do was look up. So that was fantastic. But
right. Well, and I guess the one thing to mention as a segue is they do emphasize the stars quite a bit, and you mentioned that in your show notes that you sent, Matt.
With the day
right at the very beginning. Yeah, they keep going to the stars as they're doing the credits, or as they're kind of showing. First, they show the biblical verses on the screen, and then they go to the stars, which I thought was very interesting. So my work is all about the connections between the myths and the stars, and the evidence around the world that virtually all the myths from virtually every culture on every inhabited continent and island around the world are using this system of celestial metaphor, the same system. So they're not different. The ancient Greek myths are using the same system as the stories in the Bible are using the same system. And that's not something that's accepted right now by academia, but the evidence is overwhelming. And I mean, every continent. So the myths from the Americas, the myths from ancient Japan in the Kojiki, the myths from ancient China, the myths from Africa, Australia, ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, Norse myths, Pacific Ocean cultures, Maori and Polynesia cultures, all the way from Tahiti to Hawaii to Rapa Nui, all using the same system based on the stars.
And I have to admit, my star knowledge is not tops, but I have been following Orion quite regularly for the past 5 years. So that's become like my own time clock, basically. Like I know it's this time of year because I'm walking home and there's Orion. And well, he's gone for a few months, of course, too. But
Yeah, and we don't really get taught the constellations. I mean, you don't get a class anywhere, even up through grad school, that says, okay, here's how to find the constellations. Here's how to outline the constellations. Now let's go out into the night sky and identify the constellations. And Orion is a great constellation to see, and glorious at this time of year, winter in the Northern Hemisphere. In the evening, you can still see them in the morning. But all of the constellations are not easy to pick out. Some of them are very obscure to pick out, and yet they're using the same system around the world, which I can show. I don't go too, I show it in some other podcasts and some other videos. Today, I'll focus a little bit on the flood myths, and I can't even cover all of those because they're found around the world. So I'll just give you a little sampling. But for those who are able to watch it on YouTube, it is helpful because we haven't got, most of us, even if you're into, I say this, even if you're into astrology, like people who are into astrology and know the characteristics of a Capricorn or a Sagittarius, if you're, in a bar with someone and they start talking about astrology and, oh, I'm a Sagittarius, and you say, oh, could you draw the outline of Sagittarius and the stars of Sagittarius? They won't typically know the outline of the stars because we haven't been taught them, and the outlines that we are given, that we find on Wikipedia or in some of these planetarium maps, the outlines are not helpful at all. But if you use the right outlines, then you start to see the connections around the world. So it's almost like we've been given the wrong outlines on purpose.
I know my school is at least cool enough to take us on a field trip to the planetarium. But, once they show you the constellations, they just have these ridiculous ornate pictures that don't quite really fit the stars. And also it's like terrifying to see all of those above your head. So.
Well, the ridiculous ornate picture. So H.A. Rey is it's not a tangent, but I didn't include it in my presentation, but sometimes I talk about it. He is the author whose outlines that I use and that I actually grew up with. And you might have heard me talk about it on some other podcasts. You know what else H.A. Rey wrote?
Yeah, Curious George. Oh, Drew.
Curious
right,
George.
Yeah.
Yeah. H.A. Rey and his wife, Margaret, they escaped from Paris during World War II. So Casablanca reference there. They escaped from Paris on bicycles that apparently H.A. Rey, basically put together from some bicycle parts from various bicycles. And they bicycled out of Paris right before the German army rolled in. And then they escaped to Brazil, where they'd both been, I think, before. And then they ended up in Greenwich Village, New York. And then they published the H.A. Rey books in the 40s, starting in the 40s. And then in 1952, H.A. Rey wrote this book called The Stars, A New Way to See Them. And he complained about exactly what you just said, these flowery, ornate outlines that look great on paper, but don't really match up to the stars at all. It's kind of like an artist's, rendition. And so when you go out into the sky, you look up there and you can't see it at all. Either that, or we get this jumble, which is usually what you see kind of on Wikipedia, that looks like nothing. And once again, you can't remember it, let alone pick it out in the sky. So he said, here's a system that looks like what they're supposed to be, and also is easy to see in the sky and is memorable. And it's an absolutely wonderful system. And it wasn't until much, much later that I realized that his system matches up with ancient artwork, matches up with the ancient texts. And people might say, well, how could that be? I don't know how it is. It may be that he was privy to some ancient knowledge, and he said, World War II just happened, and I think the world is going crazy. I'm going to publish it. I don't know why he published it. He never mentioned that, to my knowledge, he never made public any connection to the ancient myths and his outlines, or the ancient artwork in his outlines. But I could show you, piece after piece from around the world of art where the characters are using the same characteristics as those constellations have, including from Japan.
I'm guessing with the whole flood thing, unfortunately, my sky isn't quite dark enough to see it here, but I guess we start with the Milky Way. That's our water, is it?
That's a very good guess. And yes, so let me throw up the slides if you're ready.
Let's roll.
I have
Is
a
that a
very
good-
brief,
good call?
completely irrelevant
Go
tangent.
ahead, Luke. Yeah.
I'm currently reading Curious George with a student, and whenever the monkey needs to relax, it smokes. I'm like, wow, this was written a while ago.
Yeah. I had that wrong with a student
That's
last
right.
year.
Yeah.
The man with the yellow hat was always carrying around a pipe.
It's like,
You know,
oh, George had
in
a
fact,
busy
almost
day, so
all
he
the-
had some
yeah.
tobacco.
That's funny. Yeah. There's a lot of things in the books where you're like, this wouldn't be written today.
No.
This wouldn't really be something that you would present to kids today. But
It's 80 years ago. You can't really judge it by those standards.
Yeah.
Japan's lacking the whole
Yeah.
PC thing, so we can get away with it anyway.
Yeah.
but it does connect in, you know, some of the things that I'm going to show do connect into some of the things that you were saying, Luke and Matt. I know you've mentioned you had an Episcopal upbringing, or, you know, at some point, and these stories are all using the same system, so that the figures in the Bible correspond to the same system as the system that underlies the Greek myths, or that underlies the Norse myths. And so you see these characteristics where a God who is often angry, Thor is often angry, but he's also jovial. You know, he loves a good party. He loves he'll eat 3 entire oxen, you know, for the party, and drink a whole vat of beer. But when he gets mad, he gets really angry. And the same thing with Jove. That's where we get the word jovial. He loves to party. He's, you know, good natured most of the time, but when he gets angry, he starts throwing thunderbolts and thunderclouds around. And so those characteristics match up with a specific constellation, actually the constellation Hercules. I don't go into it that much in this, but Zeus's son, or Jove's son, is Hercules, and Hercules has those same traits. He's, you know, burly, big, full beard, likes to party, but, you know, you wouldn't want to be on his bad side. That characteristic is found in the same thunder gods in the myths of Central America, the Maya myths. And there's a character in the Kojiki of Japan, Susanoo. I'm probably not saying it exactly
Susanoo,
right.
I think. Yeah, I know who you mean.
And he is the same way. He's out of control at sometimes. And that's why Amaterasu goes and hides herself in a rock, the goddess Amaterasu, because he threw a backwards flayed horse down into the knitting hall where her servants or attendants were all weaving at the loom. And all those are celestial. It's all celestial. So I think those are great observations and that you were making about the connections.
Let's follow your line of thought then. What's the first image you want to get into?
Yeah, let me share screen.
I think I've enabled it. It should work.
Yeah, I'll give it a try. Let me know when you're seeing my screen.
There we go, January 26th, we're here.
Right on, here we are. So I started off with this image because I think there's a scene in the movie that's almost exactly like this. And it's pretty
very similar.
Bosch?
And yeah, this is a painting from someone named Francis Danby, who lived in painted in the 1800s. It's called The Deluge. And it's interesting because over here we've got a giant right there. You see that?
Oh yeah.
Much bigger than the others. Yeah. And over here you see an angel weeping over the giant. There's some interesting things in here. And actually up here, if you look very closely, if your viewers are watching this on YouTube, they might want to throw it onto a big screen rather than on their cell phone, but you can almost see the exact pounding with a rock kind of image that keeps getting repeated throughout the movie of Noah. You see that? It looks like they're fighting there.
Yeah, for 2 seconds I thought you were showing us the scene from Noah, and I was like, oh wait, this is a painting.
This is a painting.
It's
So
quite similar.
I would guess that they saw this painting before they made the movie.
Yeah.
But this is what we'll be talking about, the flood of Noah. So what do I have next? Oh, since Luke has already given us all the text, we don't need to reread it here, but this is some interesting backstory, and actually you get even more backstory in the Enochian texts. But you get the same pattern in other myths where the gods get angry because there's too much multiplying going on the earth, and the people are making too much noise. And that's why we're going to have to limit their lifespan and things like this. So I'll just outline the text, and people who are watching on YouTube, if they feel like going back and reading it for themselves, can simply pause it and go there. But this is talking about how the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and the creeping thing. It repenteth me that I have made them. I am sorry that I ever even created. It's horrible. I mean, it's frightening. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. It doesn't imply that he actually, grace theologically means a gift that is given. It's not that Noah necessarily deserved it.
I guess that's what Aronofsky's running with in this film, though. The it repenteth me. I mean, that's just made really. I mean, it's what 3 or 4 words here, but yeah, really, I guess that's what he latched onto for his tone of this movie, for better or for worse.
Right. And I've already called attention to that. 500 years old. But you're right. It's a very, if you believe that, then you might be wondering, well, what if he changes his mind again? But if you understand that this is actually esoteric, these ancient myths are not literal. And by showing that they're celestial metaphor, we can understand for sure that they're not literal. And that doesn't mean that we haven't had catastrophes on the earth. I actually am on record believing that we have had flood catastrophes that have shaped a lot of the geology or all of the geology that we see around the world. But I don't believe that this text is literally telling us about that. This text is talking about things that are going on inside of us. So, and then I go on and I'll outline this, and people can read about the destruction of all the living things, and we've already gone over it. So I'm just going to move ahead. Here's that typical representation of the ark. This is from Edward Hicks from, again, the early 1800s.
Yeah,
that's how we
my
almost
Sunday
always
school
see
class from 6 years old, and something like that would have been on the wall. Probably a little more cartoonish, but
I do love seeing paintings of animals from historical artists who've clearly never seen the animal.
Yeah. There's some long-eared tigers in the background there with really feline tails. But also look at the trees. I think you kind of get some trees like that in the movie at some point. I don't remember exactly, but now let's go to the stars. So now that we've seen a couple of images, here is the constellation Hercules that I was just telling you plays the role of Zeus, plays the role of Thor. It's not an easy constellation to see, but that is the outline that is repeated over and over in ancient artwork. I'm not going to go into it in this presentation. I have in other places, but right below Hercules is a very important constellation called Ophiuchus, a very large constellation. It looks like a central kind of almost tombstone-shaped body holding 2 serpents on either side. And then right below that is Scorpio. And they are right next to the Milky Way. So I've inverted all the colors, but you mentioned the Milky Way, Matt, very, very insightful, that is the waters that pour down from heaven and flood the earth, because I believe that definitely they play that role. And they play that role in a lot of movies, myths. They play the role of waters, either rivers or sometimes the edge of the sea in the Iliad, for instance. You mentioned the movie, The Iliad. So everything that's light on this screen is actually the dark night sky in the sky, and all the dots, the black dots are the stars. They're really bright in the sky, but I've inverted everything. So the reason I'm saying that is the Milky Way is that dark smudge.
Right.
But it's really a bright, shining path in the sky. And actually, that part right by Scorpio and Ophiuchus is the brightest and widest part, widest. That's actually the center of our galaxy. the Milky Way there. And so that's a very important, mythologically important part of the night sky. So in the descriptions of the ark, it could be a couple of different constellations, and it's not always in myths. Sometimes figures will move through different constellations. So there's another constellation that we'll see a little later called the Great Square. And I've also written that that could also play the role of the ark. But I do argue that Ophiuchus plays an ark here in the Noah story and also in many other stories. And it's got these kind of outlying, flanking, serpent-shaped figures. And I would say that that might be why you're getting this shape on the ark. It's got a central house-like figure, and then it's got kind of the curving boat-like figure around it.
That's kind of a donut.
Yeah. That's just my, I'm sketching it in. People might say, well, that's kind of a stretch. But let's go to, I just want to show, I can prove with example after example that this is going on. When you see just one example, it's not necessarily convincing. But when you start to see example after example, it becomes very, very compelling. In fact, I used to take the Bible literally. I was, happy to start exploring the connections between the Greek myths and the stars. I was not so happy to start exploring the connections between the Bible and the stars. But over time, I realized that basically every story in the Bible from first to last is connected to constellations. The first one that really hit home was the Samson story, and then some of the passages from Revelation. But let me move to, you can see I've brought in a picture in the upper, kind of near the foot of Hercules. And what is that there? That's a, exactly, the cuneiform tablet from ancient Mesopotamia. This is one of the Gilgamesh tablets. This is actually the one that talks about the flood. This is tablet, it's 10 and 11 where the flood takes place, and they call this one the flood tablet. And it's in the British Museum. And in fact, it wasn't even translated until 1872 was when, because they were all in fragments, little pieces. And first they had to be put together like a jigsaw puzzle, and then they had to be deciphered. And cuneiform was deciphered even after hieroglyphics. And there's a great story. The young man who was like a genius in England, he was like working during the day, but he would walk down to the British Museum during his lunch hour and help them translate. And then he'd go back to work at his father's printing press. That's a little tangent. But in this, when he came across this particular text, this young man, whose name is slipping my mind at the exact moment, but he became so flustered, he started running around in excitement and actually taking off his clothes, which like he was totally out of his mind, because he was encountering a story of a flood. And after the flood, the Noah character releases a raven and releases a dove. And his mind was completely he was out of his mind for a little bit. He didn't know what to do. And so in this text, the Noah character is called Utnapishti, or sometimes you see it spelled Utnapishti, sometimes Utnapishtim. But that same na sound, we'll return to it, is similar to the Noah sound, Utnapishti. He's also called, there's another Babylonian epic. So there were Sumerians and there was Akkadians, and the Akkadians were the Babylonians and the Assyrians, but it's all ancient Mesopotamian. And we're more familiar with the Babylonian and the Akkadian versions than the Sumerian versions. And that's a whole nother very interesting story we could go into. But the Sumerians invented the cuneiform, and then the Babylonians and Assyrians used it themselves later. There's another text that has a flood narrative, Atrahasis, who's probably the same figure. The first name means ancient of days, or very long of days, or very far of days. And the second one means extremely wise. So they're probably adjectives describing the same character. It's the Noah character. And in ancient Sumerian, he's called Zusudra. Sometimes you'll see it spelled with an X instead of a Z, Zusudra. And I'm not a scholar of ancient Akkadian languages or ancient Sumerian languages, so I may be corrected on some of those pronunciations. But there's amazing connections between these, some of the events in those descriptions and the stars as well. Like in the Mesopotamian, it's Enki or Ea who comes to tell the Noah figure, Utnapishtim or Atrahasis, to build an ark. And he whispers it through a crack in the wall or through a chink in the wall. And you can actually see, so in this passage, this is actually a image from one of my books that talks about this. You see how Hercules is like bending down to kind of whisper into the, almost like the serpent there of Ophiuchus is almost like a listening, one of those like listening horns. And Ophiuchus plays the role of a wall in some myths, plays the role of a hut, plays the role of a mountain. And you can see why from its shape. And so in the actual ancient text of Atrahasis, he says, Enki, see, Enlil, who wants to destroy humanity, says to the gods and goddesses, don't tell any humans. And Enki is like, well, I don't want them to all be destroyed. So he goes and he says, how am I going to not tell them? Oh, I know. I'll go to the place where Atrahasis is sleeping and I'll whisper, hey, reed hut. Hey, wall, listen up. The earth is going to be destroyed. So we need to tear down the house and turn it into an ark. And then he can say, well, I didn't actually tell Atrahasis. I just spoke it out loud to his house.
Screaming at a wall.
Yeah. And then down at the bottom, he also says, for I'll make rains fall upon you where you stand, descending like a wealth of fowl, like a treasure of fish. After I made this slide, I heard Luke's joke about the red and blue ink from East Germany. So, so I thought I'd bring that up. But look at the this is that same quote that I outlined in blue. The bitumen, that's a kind of tarry oil that they dig up in Canada. A lot of the oil is in the form of bitumen. It's the same word we get for pitch. They pitch the ark and they cover it with tar. In the movie, you see that going on, but you see this in myth after myth around the world where a baby is put into an ark and they slime it over with pitch, or they cover it with bitumen or tar. And also that part about the rains descending like a wealth of fowl. There's actually a constellation right next to the constellation that I'm arguing is an ark. That's the constellation called Aquila, which is the eagle. And a little bit further up, I cut it off in this, it didn't fit on my star map, but there's another one, Cygnus, the swan, is pointing its neck right downwards towards Aquila. So those are like the two great birds of the Milky Way. They're right there in the Milky Way. The Milky Way is like the rain coming down, like a wealth of fowl, Aquila and Cygnus, and also like a treasure of fish. And right next to them there's another beautiful little constellation called Delphinus, the dolphin, which plays the role of sometimes a salmon in Norse myths, and in Native American myths plays a role of a salmon. Sometimes it plays a role of dolphins, like when Dionysus tosses the pirates into the water and they turn into dolphins. And then here's the Milky Way pouring down right there. I outlined it for you. So there's little textual clues that we are talking about celestial events. That's the Milky Way. Also from the Mesopotamian. So now I'm going to tell you who I think Noah is. Anyone recognize these interesting science fiction looking characters?
Are we looking at Seven Sages with the bags?
Yeah, that's right. Not the greatest resolution when I blew it up to large size, but this is a figure who's often called Oannes. Have you ever heard that name before? There was a 3rd century BC Hellenistic era, like after Alexander the Great had kind of conquered the Mesopotamian area and brought Greek there, but he was a priest of Marduk, so he was from Mesopotamia, but he wrote in Greek named Berossos or Berossos, and he wrote about these figures, you said about the 7 sages, and a figure called Oannes who comes up out of the water and then goes back down into the water, and that name, again, Oannes, is linguistically similar to Noah and also to Utnapishtim or Utnapishti, and also to Jonah, who gets swallowed by a fish, and to John, Oannes. It's similar to Owen in Ireland, which is basically a form of John, or Juan in Spain, which is basically a form of John. So we'll see that linguistic pattern over and over. But look at the outline of the fish. It's kind of an interesting shape. He's holding one of those mysterious bags. Now I'm going to show you the constellation that I think is a very strong candidate. In fact, pretty much a slam dunk for Noah. If you can't get Russell Crowe to play Noah, then you should get this constellation, because that's actually who Noah is right there. That's Aquarius. You see how he has that water pitcher?
Right.
See how he's kind of pitched forward? He's carrying a pitcher there. That's his water vessel, pouring out water. Nearby is this fish, Piscis austrinus, which means the southern fish, or Piscis austrinus, an important constellation. We'll mention it in a minute. And also Capricorn, which is important later in the story. So I am not the first one to argue connections between the myths and the stars. And so there's others who have argued. There's actually a preacher in England in the Episcopalian Church who was named Robert Taylor, who lived from, I think, 1755 to 1825. And I might have those dates a little wrong. He was talking about the connections between the Bible and the stars. And he actually got kicked out of the church for that and got imprisoned for 3 years for that. But he talks about the connections between Aquarius and these Oannes figures. And look at the hat, the fish kind of hat, and look at the shape of Aquarius's hat or head. You see how it could look like almost a fish?
That's our
shaped
papal hat for the Pope.
Matt is anticipating. Okay. So that's a bishop's hat. That's the hat of a bishop. And you see how it's a fish hat, a fish mouth? And it's very much the same shape as the head of Aquarius. So those are some arguments that Jonah is connected to Aquarius. We'll see some more. But if you had to guess which of the zodiac constellations, or really which of any of the constellations would be a figure who's so associated with water as Noah is, you'd probably want to include Aquarius as a likely candidate for the role. But also there's this figure in the New Testament. You may or may not be familiar with this story, but this is a story where Jesus and his disciples want to go somewhere, and the tax collector or the gate guard says, "Oh, well, you got to pay the tribute, or you got to pay the toll." And Jesus says, "Oh," and all the disciples say, "We don't have any money." And Jesus says, "Don't worry about that. Just Peter, go catch a fish." And then this is in Matthew 17, the tribute money is found in the mouth of the fish. If you look closely at this painting, this is from the 1600s. The tribute money is found in the mouth of the fish. I don't know if you can see that on your screens there. A couple coins coming out of the mouth of the fish. Notice see Piscis austrinus down there below the screen?
Right.
How it has a very bright star in the mouth of the fish. The name of that star is actually Fomalhaut, which means the mouth of the fish. It's a bright star like a shiny coin in the mouth of the fish. But what's really important, the reason I bring it up here, is Simon Peter is at one point in the Gospel of Matthew referred to by Jesus as Simon Bar Jonah. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you can do a search through Matthew and find Simon Bar Jonah, which means Simon, son of Jonah. So Simon Peter is somehow associated with Jonah, who I'm saying is also associated with that same Noah, Jonah, is associated with Aquarius. And by the way, Peter was the first, pope or the first bishop of Rome, according to tradition, right? He's the first one to have that headgear. He's associated with Aquarius. Peter is associated with Aquarius, and he's also associated with Jonah, who's also, it's the same fishy character, and he's a fisherman throughout these different stories. And later he gets drunk, and this is where we really have some textual evidence to associate Noah with the constellation Aquarius, as I'll show you in a minute. But remember this part from the movie?
Right. I guess he's just lost his pants down here. That's probably for the best.
So he got falling down drunk. Right. Yeah. So actually it says in the Bible that, and after the flood, Noah was a husbandman and grew a vineyard and then made wine. And that's the first mention we have of wine in the Bible. And so many people, especially those who take it literally, say, oh, that's the first, time anyone made wine. And so probably didn't know what he was drinking there. And he got so falling down drunk, he passed out naked. And Ham comes and calls attention to the fact. And Shem and Japheth say, well, we can't see our father naked. So they put a cloak between their shoulders and walk backwards to drape it over Noah so they can cover him without actually seeing his nakedness.
Meanwhile, we have hot springs here in Japan.
Yeah. Right, that's right. Yeah. But it's a very important passage because it's been used literally, it's been twisted literally, because Noah then, when he wakes up, it says, well, he knew what his son Ham had done. We never actually find out what he did. All he did was, that we know of, was he called attention to his father's nakedness and told his brothers. But Ham is cursed and told he will serve his other two brothers, Shem and Japheth. And so for years, all the way up, centuries, all the way up until the 1800s, this was used for very racist interpretations to say, well, okay, so the sons of Ham are they must be these different ethnicities, and the sons of Shem are these different ethnicities, and the sons of Japheth are these ones. And so those ones we can enslave, and they've got, you can find maps where they put over the, I could even show one. We could go on Wikipedia and you could see where they say, oh, this is, Ham's children are here in Africa and going across to here. And then Japheth is, that's Europe. And so it all becomes very racialized. And, that's another criticism you can make of the movie is that, well, what's up with all the,
everyone in it's very white.
And then, so the implication is what, that, afterwards, then they branch off. But again, I don't want to, I'm already focusing too much on the movie, but this is it's actually very esoteric, metaphorical. It has to do with the total opposite of the way it's been twisted. And so it's an example that I use to show how taking it literally gives I would argue, the exact opposite message of what, when we understand that it's esoteric and it's metaphorical, can show. So this is a painting from 1360. Let me show one more. This is from the Nuremberg Chronicle of 1493. This one's instead of Japheth is now covering his eyes. He's actually depicted in this one in the place of Sagittarius. But Ham, who's spelled with a C because it's actually like Ham, it's a guttural sound. And Shem is covering him, and Ham is trying to call attention to his father's nakedness. But look at the outline, the posture of Noah.
Yeah, it's quite similar.
It's just like Aquarius.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, and we'll show it in a minute, but also he's the first one to build a vineyard. And we've got this kind of square in the corner of this. This is from the 1400s. Whoops, I went a little fast, but there's, look at Aquarius, and there's Capricorn. There's the great square, not far away, the great square of Pegasus, which is in between these branching fishes of Pisces. So now I'll bring back the 1400s painting here. So my argument, and I think it's pretty much beyond doubt from the text and from the way it's been depicted down through the centuries, but mostly from the text. This is one where I was wondering what is this what does this mean? And when I got it, it was when I actually remember thinking about this before, like I couldn't figure it out. And in the morning I woke up and I knew the answer. Like it came to me, not right away, but a little bit after waking up. I was like, oh, I know the celestial connections here. So Noah is connected to Aquarius. We can see why he's naked from the outline of the constellation. We'll talk about that in a minute. But look at how the outline of the look at how the outline of the
first showed me the constellation.
yeah. It's actually the myths get very explicit at times. So there, look at the outline and look at the outline. And then we have the vineyard. There's the branching vines there, but also this kind of square, the great square. I don't know if you're able to see my arrow because
Just
I've got
about,
this.
yeah.
You have screen sharing at the top, but great square of Pegasus plays the role of a vineyard in other myths around the world and also in the Bible, which I'll show you in a little bit. But and then Capricorn is Ham, sorry, not Shem. Capricorn is Shem. And he's calling attention to his father's nakedness. You see that?
Mm.
Because the forward leg of Aquarius could be interpreted as a portion of the male anatomy when naked, and Capricorn is pointing right towards it. And that's why he's actually depicted with kind of a hand gesture that has to do with the horns of the goat, and he's pointing out the nakedness of his father. That's where this whole story comes from. And then who are the ones who carry a sheet between them and walk backwards to cover Aquarius?
Where is that?
Yeah, where is it? I didn't put an arrow. It's Pisces. The great square is the sheet.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Pisces.
They walk backwards. They got to go backwards because Aquarius is pointing to the left. They've got to go from left to right to go cover Aquarius's nakedness. They're carrying the sheet in between them. So it could play a vineyard. It could also play a sheet. It could also play a flayed horse, a backward flayed horse. In the myths of Japan, there's a backward flayed horse that Susanoo, or I'm not pronouncing it right because I don't.
I've only seen it written down, so I mean I can do my best.
But the great square is actually called the great square of Pegasus because right underneath the words actually is the outline of the horse. So he's been flayed. That's his skin that's been pulled off in the Kojiki story. So you see how these myths can play these roles, or the constellations play these different roles in different myths. And actually, I live among a lot of vineyards here in Central California, and you can see how the branching fork of Pisces, I think that probably is, envisioned as a grape, old grapevine branching off there in the story where Noah plants a vineyard. But look at the outline. Look at the outline of Aquarius, and there's Ham. I've actually reversed it, but this is from the 1360 Darmstadt painting. I've reversed it and put it on top of Capricorn just to show how clearly his hand and arm signals make the outline of Capricorn. He's got the horns with one hand, and he's got the little bobtail with his other hand. And in other paintings, you'll see they like make the legs and the head with the elbows of the arms. I don't show that in this presentation, but you can see it often in pictures of Doubting Thomas. He makes the same horns of the goat when he points towards the wound in the side in the Doubting Thomas episode. So that's why Ham becomes the scapegoat. So I would argue that these stories are actually talking about, if they're talking about constellations, then nobody's descended from this or that constellation. It's metaphor, and it's talking about spiritual things, and it's actually talking about, don't call attention to the frailty of our bodies, right? If any of us drinks enough wine, we'll pass out just like Noah, right? So
I'm good to go.
Yeah, I mean, we're all subject to the frailties of the human body. Of, if you poison us, we'll fall down, and if you drink enough wine, that's poison. You'll fall down. And the story is about not making fun of not we all know that we're something more than just our body, right? When we get just treated as, when we just get made fun of or ridiculed or put down because of our body, we like rebel against that. In fact, the Watchers kind of show that in the movie. He's showing, we're dragged down in chains and encased in this mud. We all rebel against that. And actually, when we curse someone else or when we use swear words, they're usually body image, right? It's usually like shit, or, all the curse words you can think of have to do with basically just trying to reduce you to a body. And that's what Ham is doing in this episode, right? Ham is pointing out to his father, and saying, hey, Shem and Japheth, come over here. Look, Dad's just a pile of meat. He's just, look at him. He's drunk. Right.
I guess my take is that
and they say no. Well, and they say we have to cover that up because we want to preserve the dignity that's inherent in everybody. So it's actually about not reducing people to their external characteristics. And yet this story, historically, because it's been literalized and told, it is about literal people, and you're descended from that one, and you're descended, has basically turned it totally on its head, right? It said, judge people by their ancestry or their physical characteristics. It's like the exact opposite. So I think it's a really important, powerful illustration of the problems with taking it too literally.
Is that what the tales are? I mean, when the night sky was your main source of evening entertainment, we have these stories built in and we tell them.
Yeah, I think it's a really amazing system that has it's got like profound lessons to teach us. I've got some more stuff to show you if you want, just a few more, we can roll into it. But I think this came from,
it's fine.
Yeah, we actually got to leave for our day jobs in
got a boogie.
minutes.
Okay,
So
yeah.
If you can blast through them, let's do it.
Yeah, well, let me just quickly, I will blast through them. So let me go back to share screen. I won't spend much time at all on this part. Let me go here. So that's Capricorn. There's another story in the Bible where we can see for sure that the vineyard is the great square. It's called the story of Balaam and his donkey. It's usually called Balaam and the ass. That's how it's in the King James Version, where he's beating the donkey because the donkey won't go forward because there's an angel in the path, but Balaam doesn't see the angel. But there's actually a vineyard in that story. And so I've shown that Balaam is associated with Perseus, the constellation Perseus, and the angel, and he's riding on the donkey. That's Taurus with the long horns. Instead, it's the long ears. But the angel is Andromeda in the path, and the vineyard is the great square. So there's tons of evidence that Balaam is Perseus and the angel is Andromeda. But in the interest of time, we'll just blast forward. But that's additional evidence that the great square is the vineyard in the Noah story as well. So I think our interpretations of the Noah story have a lot of backing. This is from the Norse myths. There's a great flood when Ymir is slain by the first of the Aesir gods, Odin being one of them, but two strong Jotuns escape, Jotun and his wife. And that Jotun's name is Bergelmir, and they float away on an ice floe. But this illustration is from this book that I had as a child, which I loved. And I'll just skip along with that, but I'll just go through. We could show these parallels. This is from the Younger Edda of Snorri, but it says, it's actually described as he floated away on a mill bench or a mortar, which a mortar is something, now it's something we launch mortar rounds out of, but basically it's a mortar and pestle is what you grind up the grain in, which again, Ophiuchus plays that in many myths in Africa, in India, in the Norse myths around the world. So that's the arc again in this Norse myth. It's also in the Elder Edda or the Poetic Edda, where the same Bergelmir is laid in a cradle, or it's actually the word is a luther, which means like a manger or a place that you put the flour, like a mill flour, like a mortar. So we have these figures around the world who get laid in a box and sent out into the water. Perseus actually does. His mother and he get put into a box by his grandfather. Moses, of course, gets put in an ark of bulrushes and slimed with pitch and all those other things. In India, there's a figure named Karna who's put into an ark by his mother and put into a different river, the Yamuna River. In other Mesopotamian, there's an ancient king named Sargon. He's put into he says in his this is actually his biography in cuneiform. He says, "Oh, I was put into the water by my mother, who was a priestess of Isis, and nobody could know that she was pregnant, so she put me in the water." In the Beowulf, there's someone named Shield Shafing, who's also put into an ark as a baby. And then in Japan, I just had to race ahead to get to this.
Oh, of course.
Do you know who's put into the water?
Something Ko. I got the Ko.
Yes, correct. Hiruko.
There we go.
That's actually, you see that little symbol on the left, isn't that an insect symbol? That's the insect symbol in Chinese, the insect radical.
Sometimes it is, but sometimes they just use it for the sound, so you can't always be sure.
It's the leech child. He was born with no bones, so they called him the leech child, and they put him to sea. His parents put him to sea, and later he's also given this name, more commonly known by this name, but in the Kojiki he's called Hiruko, the leech child, but he's cast into the water. That's the god of fishermen.
Beer.
The god of fishermen.
Nice beer.
And beer, okay.
Yeah,
and beer. So there's another parallel to Noah.
Yeah.
So there's another parallel to Noah. I didn't even know that. There's another parallel to Noah. I didn't even know that. So So anyway, I'll just finish off with this. It's all part of this big system. It's an ancient system. I don't think it's just telling stories, although certainly, they were much closer to the stars back then because they could see them without light pollution. But and I think this comes from some very ancient, sophisticated pre-Egypt civilization, because it's already in the myths of Egypt. It's already in Babylonia. But this in the zodiac wheel, I'll just quickly, this is the last thing I'm showing here. The upper and the lower, they all have esoteric meaning, but we plunge down into the lower elements in this life. And that's the watery passage. That's the going through the watery passage. So in these ancient myths, going through the flood is actually what we're going through in this life. And that is actually how in the Mesopotamian myths, that's how Utnapishtim is. He says at the end, the gods came to me after I went through the flood and said, now you used to be a mortal man, but now you and your wife shall become like us gods because you went through the flood. We're going through the flood in this life. That's what's going on.
You got to enjoy the flood.
Well, yeah, it's a metaphor for what we're experiencing right now in this life. We're in this body that's made of water, 7/8 water. I mean, there's lots of esoteric, Gnostic type parallels or lessons that are hidden in there, but you've got to understand them in this esoteric way. It's not literal.
Exactly.
So I rushed that, but
no,
hopefully
sorry.
that's coherent.
The man caught us in about 30 minutes earlier today. So.
Oh my goodness. All right.
Or the lady, I guess, in our case. But obviously that's sort of a primer for people. There you have some pretty deep work to delve into, some books. Can you tell our listeners a bit about where they can dive in deeper into these floodwaters and some other myths as well, of course?
Yeah, right on. The website is called Star Myths of the World. So if you just look for, it's starmythworld.com is the URL. And it's got sections with a blog, it's got videos, and it's got books that I've written. I've made, several dozen videos of varying degrees of quality. I'm still working on my filmmaking skills. You guys probably would say, oh my goodness, but I'm trying to share this information and show and show it to people. So.
And would you mind spelling your last name for a listener really quick? Because if you spell it wrong, you get a very different result.
That's true. You can just put in Mathisen and stars and find it, but let me quickly. I actually made a slide there. It's Mathisen, Mathisen. If you just put Mathisen, you can find it. There's Instagram, and I do have there's the spelling, a YouTube channel, so
There we go. Okay.
people can check
And you
that
got it
out.
out.
Thank
loud
you
for us
for
as well.
thanks.
But no, thanks. That was quite a lesson. Definitely, yeah. You're the smartest guy in this Zoom room, I'll tell you that.
No, I wanted to hear more of your guys' witty banter and insightful comments, but I monopolized the conversation with my presentation.
No. Yeah, we
Hopefully
wanted to get that out
you can
there
see
because
it.
I wanted to get the flood broken down a bit. So that came through very nicely. So thank you for that.
Yeah, the one thing which I wanted to bring up, but I didn't really, I'm big into paleontology. And when you read early paleontology papers, they all take the flood very literally. And when they're digging up dinosaurs and mammoths, say, oh, these are animals from before the flood.
Antediluvian, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
very odd way of interpreting it.
Well, it's, I think there is a catastrophe in this story somewhere because it's like humanity has forgotten.
Well, we know that we survived, ice ages and all sorts, right?
Yeah.
But the people 10,000, 100,000 years ago, they didn't have the technology we have. They had our brains. So they were thinking these thoughts and writing these stories.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them got forgotten along the way, but somehow they got carried mouth to mouth and retold around the world.
It's just so interesting that the interpretation so similar. It's suggesting, people, I guess, would come out from a similar area with the same stories. So, and some, spread out and multiply. No, go forth and multiply.
Yes, the one.
Thank you.
That's right. That is the command given to Noah. But really, this shows that we're all connected. We're all related. All our actual myths that have been used to divide us, actually, when you understand that they're all built on the same system, should unite us. And that's what I think. I think the myths are actually teaching positive and uplifting messages that we still need today, that have to do with all kinds of things that we're going through right now.
Again, David, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
today.
I know you guys got to go.
Yeah, in 20 minutes we'll be wiping tables and vacuuming floors.
Right. Well, let's have a beer together someday, and we can just riff about all kinds of things. I really enjoyed it.
So, Luke, how shall people exit the sanctuary today?
Well, they should all go forth themselves and safely multiply.
There we go. Okay, thank you again. Yeah, this is one I'll have to listen to my own podcast about 3 times. You gave us just a lot of stuff to chew on. That was great.
Thanks,
right,
gentlemen.
thanks so much.
Great to meet you, Luke and Matt.
I'll have to be looking a little more distant than just Orion, I think, because I definitely get some nice star views. So.
Yeah, I would like to get better identifying the stars. I can find Orion's belt, and that's about it. So.
Yeah, definitely. H.A. Ray belongs on everyone's shelf.
I've heard of that one. I've had trouble finding it. One, because I live in Japan, but yeah, that's one that's been on my radar. But it seems a little difficult to track down. So
you might be able to get a digital copy at least.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. We're going to have to dash.
Thanks, Luke and Matt. Take care.
Bye.
See ya.